Welcome to the April Book Talk. This month we're covering a book that reads like an action-packed anime and a classic novel about an insomniac wandering post-war Amsterdam, because apparently sleep was optional back then. Let's go. Welcome back, Lexophiles, Bibliophiles, and Quillophiles. Today's Book Talk is brought to you by absolutely no one. Not so much because I still haven't sold out, but because nobody has been brave enough to show up and sponsor me yet. But hey, if anyone out there wants to sponsor me with, say, some coffee or a good bourbon, I'm listening. I'm listening very carefully. I'm still listening. Oh well, I tried. Anyway, today, let's talk about something fun. We're going to cover 2 books today. I wanted to do this one first because it kind of excited me when I got it, because it wasn't something I typically read. You're going to hear that a lot from you when I'm doing this, because there are so many books that I'm getting that if I were going out and shopping for the book myself, I probably wouldn't touch it. This is exposing me to some really new work and some really creative people. And so I just finished reading a book called The Infernulls, The Golden Letter, by an author named Zegi. I'm not sure what the real name is. It's just the pen name, and I'll respect that. I'm not going to push it. This book doesn't read like a book. It reads more like someone said, let's make anime that you can read. And Zegi did that. So, reading an anime. You ever read something and think immediately, okay, this was meant to be watched? And that's the feel you get with this one. The pacing is fast, the scenes are visual, the action feels like it's been storyboarded, like Zegi probably had a wall where they drew all the pictures up and put them up there in order to write out what they were wanting to tell you. And honestly, I had a lot more fun reading this than I expected to have. There's something fun about a book that embraces the energy that this one did without any apologies. It's not trying to be literary, it's not trying to be grimdark. It's not trying to be a 900-page lore brick. It's just trying to be something that gives you a good time. It's not a book that's trying to tickle any moral compass or anything. And sometimes that's exactly what we need. Let's talk about the structure for a second. There's a growing trend in Western fantasy, the rise of the light novel style. Shorter chapters, episodic flow, character-first scenes, humor mixed with high stakes, and a sense that you're reading something that's designed to be binged. Infernal actually fits right into that space. It's the kind of book you take in over a weekend, and you don't feel like you've wasted your time. You sit down thinking, I'll read a chapter, and suddenly it's 2 a.m. and you're wondering where your self-control went. And I think that that's worth celebrating. Not everything needs to be dense. Not everything needs to be a commitment. Sometimes you want fantasy that respects your time and gives you momentum. In short, a good fantasy does not always have to be Tolkien-esque. Infernals is a genuinely fun read. It was also not entirely what I expected it to be. And that's not a bad thing, and that's not a small thing. I like being surprised by something I'm reading, and this did do that. See, today we talk about craft, world building, and themes, and symbolism in our characters and plots and story arcs. How often when we're outlining do we take into consideration just the fun the reader might be looking for? And again, this was a fun read. Infernals feels like a novel that grew up watching shonen anime, playing RPGs, and watching or reading webcomics. And instead of hiding that influence, it feels like it embraces it. And that hybrid energy is kind of addictive. It's familiar without being derivative. It's energetic without being chaotic. Well, maybe a little chaos, but it's the good kind of chaos. Here's the part that surprised me, though. This feels like great gateway fantasy. You don't need a glossary or a dictionary to figure out the characters or what they're going to do or where they're heading. You don't need a map. You don't need to memorize 40 character names or political factions. The world building is accessible, it's not complex, but it feels good. The stakes are clear and explained in a way that you understand the destination without feeling like you have to have anything over-explained to you. And most importantly, the characters are expressive and easy to follow. If you have a friend who says, I don't like fantasy, this is the kind of book you hand them. And it's approachable. It's fast. It's fun. It's the literary equivalent to a warm-up stretch. So here's my takeaway. And again, this is not a review. I don't do reviews. I just talk about what I got from the story or the book. Infernulls, The Golden Letter, reminded me that reading doesn't always have to be serious. It doesn't have to be heavy. It doesn't have to be profound. Not every book needs to be War and Peace or Battlefield Earth. Sometimes it can just be enjoyable. Sometimes it can feel like watching anime in your head, like watching Saturday morning cartoons, like picking up a comic and just reading to have fun. And honestly, that's a gift. So if you're looking for something fun, fast, and full of energy, something that respects your time and gives your imagination a little jolt, this might be the book for you. And on an aside, I believe Zegi is working on a continuation to the story. And if so, I do believe I'm going to be reading that one as well. Now, if I could just get my son to read. Our second book for the show is kind of a drastic turn. I mean, you can't get much more of a 180 than this. But our second book of the show is going to be The Evenings with Gerard Reve. I know that's a big shift from the previous book again. But first, I have to say that while I did, in the end, enjoy this book, it's not an easy book to read. And while I'm happy that I had a chance to experience it, it is not a book I'll go back through and reread anytime soon. Maybe eventually, but not now. So let's talk about it, shall we? So even though this book is set in a post-war setting, the book is more a portrait of post-war psychic or mental numbness and not a post-war trauma. Most post-war novels dramatize the trauma, the guilt, or the reconstruction following the lives of people that were affected by the war and what they did to move on. The Evenings does something a little different. It shows more of an absence of emotional response. Fritz isn't shattered. He's hollowed out, apathetic. I almost get the feeling he was sort of in his own version of a post-war shock, you might say. You might even say that his insomnia is a metaphor for the country itself, unable to rest after everything that it's been through. And Fritz is, at his core, an anti-charismatic character. Before Arthur Dent and before Patrick Bateman, and even before the modern wave of hyper-ordinary protagonists that we see today, Reve gave us Fritz. He's petty, he's bored, fascinated with the decay around him, and many times he comes off as rather unkind to those around him. But through all this, there's something about him that draws you in and keeps you interested in him. You might think of him as a slow-moving train wreck. You want to turn away, you want to put the book down, but you just have this feeling that you need to see what's going on next. You need to read a little bit further. For me, he feels like that friend that everyone seems to have who comes over and will sit there but not say much. Yet you cannot find a polite way to ask them to leave, so you continue to just have this uncomfortable yet largely one-sided conversation with them. And the type of character you break out the lower shelf vodka for. He's not someone you can admire. There's nothing heroic about him, and he's barely interesting. But all that considered, there's something almost hypnotic about the tone and the honesty through the story that comes from him. The humor in the book is dry, bleak, and almost aggressively understated, as if the author went out of his way to make it difficult to see. If you're familiar with the way British comedy is, think of this as the same hollow feel, but you'll still laugh at it. What many readers will or may miss in The Evenings is its own way. It's comedy. It's not the ha-ha laugh out loud kind of comedy that keeps you guessing and laughing. But for example, there's this ongoing obsessive monologue about baldness, something I can identify with. There's this awkward social visits that leave you, as the reader, feeling like you need to apologize to the other party for the visit. The way some of the conversations feel pointless and remind the reader of some of the discussions or arguments you might have with you might see on a random episode of Seinfeld. And the way, in its own way, Fritz tends to monologue in his own miseries with a theatrical flair of seriousness. The reader feels like this is a story where the humor, as subtle as it might be, becomes a coping machinery or a coping mechanism that keeps Fritz moving and navigating through his own existential dread. The deliberate feel and the structure of the book is over a course of 10 nights, each with a pure sense of wash, rinse, and repeat. And it's there for a reason. You can tell that this is a deliberate message from the author to the reader to share the repetitive cycles of depression and stagnation in post-war Amsterdam. It builds on the sameness of the post-war day-to-day life that everybody seems to be going through, with a spotlight on Fritz and his family. And through the storytelling, you feel like you're stuck in a never-ending loop with Fritz, with no sign of change on the horizon, and worse, the feeling that there's no catalyst for change in his life or immediate vicinity at all. For me, it felt like the structure or lack thereof and an emptiness became every bit as much a part of the character as Fritz itself. As a whole, nothing really seems to happen in this book. There's no big storylines. There are no earth-shattering plot complications. There is no hero. And no one stands out as a standout character. I can't think of a better way to say it. There is no love interest, and there are no twists that will take you off your feet. This story is about little stories. The little stories that happen as Fritz moves through his world. Things like the way he interacts with his parents, and the way they in turn interact with each other and him. It's a story about awkwardness. The awkwardness of friendships, something I think we can all identify with at some point or another in our lives. I know I sure can. It personifies the ritual of visiting people when you have no reason to be there or anything meaningful to say to them when you get there. Yet you're there anyway, in that awkward, sometimes cringy silence, looking for something to talk about. And in that, the small cruelties and kindnesses that hide there. You could say that this is sort of written like one might make a quilt if they were to use life as a material, except that the story isn't in the material itself or in the panels that you're sewing together. It's sort of in the stitching that holds everything together, the things that we don't really pay attention to or don't really look for. All in all, I do suggest you read it. It is a good read. It is a difficult read, but it is a good read. And I am glad that I have it part of my library now. But like I said earlier, you might find yourself setting it down for a while and then returning to it later. I certainly wasn't able to read it straight through. I had to read it for a little while. I'd read like maybe 40, 50 pages, sit it down, come back to it about a week later and go through another 40 or 50 pages. And there were times I genuinely laughed. And there's other times I just was trying to force my way through it because I really wanted to take it in. I am going to ask you all, if you have read this book, I would be interested in knowing what you have to say about it. You can send me a voice message or you can just go ahead and send me an email. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. And if by some chance out there, and this is a long shot, if by some chance the family or estate of Gerard Reve, and I'm probably saying his last name wrong, Reve, if the family or the estate of Gerard Reve happens to hear this podcast and hear what I have to say, I would love to hear anything you could tell me about him or his thoughts while he might have been writing this book or what kind of person he was. I think everybody is interesting when they write this kind of stuff. And on that note, a big thank you to Zeggy for letting me go through their book and talk about it on my show. Equally, big thanks to Gerard Reve. If in spirit, if nothing else, I did enjoy the book. But like I said, it is not an easy book to go through. And I thank you all for listening. I appreciate all the listeners out there because I do see that you're out there. I just wish some of you would write and say hi. Let me know you're out there. And on that note, may your ink be quick, your chapters be bingeable, and may your imagination always run at 24 frames per second. Goodbye, everybody.